Okay, let's dive right in. Look at this staggering number, 92.93%. That is the historic, record-breaking voter turnout for the 2026 West Bengal Legislative Assembly election. To put that into perspective for you, for an electorate roughly the size of several medium-sized countries, a near 93% participation rate is literally an absolute tidal wave of civic engagement. Welcome to this explainer of the source material. Today, we're unpacking the data, the central controversies, and the unprecedented scale of this deeply polarized geopolitical event. West Bengal has emerged as one of the most intensely contested political battlegrounds in India, and the sheer volume of voters making their voices heard tells us, for sure, that the stakes have never been higher.
We've got a lot of complex ground to cover today. We'll start with the high-stakes battleground, move to the issues driving the electorate, address the electoral roll controversy, look at the historic turnout in math, and finally, dive into what the exit polls predict.
All right, Section 1, the high-stakes battleground. Let's map out the scale of this 2026 election.
So this is a monumental democratic exercise, with over 68 million registered voters deciding the fate of 294 legislative assembly seats. The magic number for a majority here is 148. Now, the absolutely crucial point to understand is the sharp bipolarity of this context. Over the past decade, the traditional multi-party dynamic has basically crystallized into a direct heavyweight confrontation. On one side, you have the incumbent All India Trinamool Congress, or ATC, led by Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee. She's built her campaign on a massive 15-year welfare architecture. And on the exact opposite side, you've got the challenger, the Bharatiya Janata Party, spearheaded by the leader of the opposition, Suvendu Adhikari, who you might remember famously defeated Banerjee in that high-profile Nandigram contest back in 2021.
And this brilliantly illustrates the foundation of the current battle, building right off those 2021 results. The AITC secured a massive 215 seats, well over the 148 needed for a majority, leaving the BJP as the primary opposition with 77 seats. Meanwhile, traditional forces like the left and Congress parties were totally marginalized, securing barely a fraction of the electorate's mandate. That basically set the stage for the intense two-way showdown we're analyzing today.
Moving right along to Section 2, issues driving the electorate. We're talking welfare, identity, and governance. So, what's actually driving voters to the polls? We're looking at a rapidly shifting narrative here. The AITC heavily emphasizes welfare delivery, specifically massive cash transfer schemes like Lakshmi Bandar and Kanya Shri, while appealing strongly to Bengali identity or Asmita. The BJP, on the other hand, focuses strictly on governance, shining a spotlight on allegations of corruption, specifically school and government job recruitment scams. Other huge points of debate include the Citizenship Amendment Act, border security, and women's safety, which of course drew national attention following the tragic RG Care Medical College case in 2024.
We really must balance how these issues are framed, because both sides hold fiercely opposing viewpoints. For instance, on the topic of migration, the BJP points to cross-border movement and the vulnerable Siliguri corridor as critical national security threats requiring stringent measures. In stark contrast, the AITC totally rejects this rhetoric, arguing that these claims are just politically motivated attempts to drive communal polarization among the electorate. We're literally seeing these dueling narratives play out in every single speech and campaign rally.
Which brings us to Section 3, the electoral roll controversy, and this massive 12% shrinkage of the electorate.
Now, this was undeniably the most fiercely debated controversy of the entire campaign, the Special Intensive Revision, or SIR. Initiated in October 2025, this single exercise shrank the state's total eligible voters by nearly 12%. It dropped the count from over 76.6 million down to roughly 68.2 million voters. I mean, wiping 9 million names off the rolls right before an election, that is a logistical earthquake.
But when you break down the demographics of those 9 million removed voters, a really fascinating pattern emerges. While over 6 million were categorized as absentee, untraceable, or deceased, 2.7 million voters had their status left pending before tribunals. And political observers noted a distinct demographic trend here. Roughly 65% of that pending undecided group were Muslims, while Dalit Hindu refugee groups, like the crucial Matua voting bloc, were also heavily affected in certain districts.
The political divide over this data is basically night and day. The ruling AITC warned of mass disenfranchisement, claiming that genuine voters were being systematically stripped of their democratic rights.
On the other side of the aisle, the BJP vigorously defended the purge, stating it was a completely necessary cleanup to remove bogus entries and illegal migrants from the system. As you might expect, this whole controversy remained under intense judicial scrutiny throughout the entire campaign.
All right, Section 4, Historic Turnout and Math. Let's look at how they broke records across the phases.
Despite all these intense controversies, or, maybe because the stakes felt so incredibly high, the state witnessed unprecedented voter engagement. The Election Commission split the massive electorate into two focused phases. Phase 1 took place on April 23rd, covering 152 constituencies, and that was followed by Phase 2 on April 29th for the remaining 142. To manage a crowd this big safely, they deployed over 350,000 security personnel, even bringing in the National Investigation Agency for the first time ever in a state election. And it all leads up to May 4th, the official counting day.
Okay, look at this math, because a super fascinating trend pops out here. Female voter turnout actually outpaced male turnout in both phases. In Phase 1, an astounding 94.09% of eligible women cast their ballots. That is massive. It really showcases the active engagement from women voters across the region, which both parties aggressively targeted with their welfare and safety platforms.
And finally, Section 5, What the Polls Predict, anticipating those May 4th results.
Because of the sheer scale of the turnout, we are left on a thrilling cliffhanger. The variance among these polling agencies is just staggering. Today's Shankya is predicting a massive tsunami for the BJP, forecasting them to win 192 seats, which would be a very comfortable majority. But People's Pulse projects a totally different reality, forecasting a dominant victory for the AITC with up to 187 seats. Meanwhile, Matras predicts a tighter race, but still leans toward the BJP. It is incredibly rare to see polling agencies diverge this drastically on a state election. Somebody is going to be very wrong.
To understand the math behind today's Chanakya's specific prediction of a BJP wave, we have to look at their vote share forecast. They're predicting a massive 10% vote share lead for the BJP, 48% against the AITC's 38%. In a strictly bipolar contest like this, where the left and Congress are marginalized, a 10% vote share gap mathematically translates into an absolute landslide of seats.
But as this quote from the Economic Times rightly reminds us, exit polls are just that. They're early snapshots. They are not the final results. The true, undeniable mandate of the people is locked away in ballot boxes until the official counting actually begins.
And so that brings us to the ultimate question. With stakes this incredibly high, a highly scrutinized purged electoral roll, dueling narratives on welfare and security, and a record-breaking 92.93% turnout, we're left wondering how this fierce mandate will reshape the region's democratic future. What will the final verdict on May 4th actually reveal? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes on the data, and we'll see exactly what history decides.